Hi, welcome to Bespoke Unit, I'm CP, and in this video I'm reviewing the Camacho Corojo. As per usual, this review will be conducted using the Bespoke Unit Cigar Formula, a quantifiable review matrix that you can use at home. Simply look in the description where you'll see a link to a guide which will teach you how to use it. And also, we have been storing these cigars in the Boveda acrylic humidor that you can probably not see behind me as I've lowered the angle of the camera, but rest assured it is there. They've been stored for a period of 3 weeks to make sure they were properly acclimated with 69% Boveda packs and a Boveda butler to monitor them. The original Corojo, the infamous and the bold everyday smoke. These are just a couple of the buzzwords and marketing terms that Camacho loves to use with its beloved Corojo blend. Indeed, the Corojo leaf plays a central role in Camacho's identity. After all, it is a crossing between the Mesoamerican Criollo and the Indonesian Sumatra. It was first developed by Diego Rodriguez in Cuba, and after the revolution, his son Daniel went into exile and continued cultivating it in the New World regions. The Eiroa family, who founded Camacho, specialized in the Corojo leaf, and so when Davidoff purchased it, this became one of the most important features. Today, these cigars are manufactured at the new Camacho family, the Diadema Cigars de Honduras in Danlí in Honduras, and it is constructed using the Camacho proprietary power band accordion style, which is meant to produce the scientifically perfect draw. And indeed, in my experience, Camacho cigars have impeccable construction. The cigar is a full Corojo blend. The wrapper, the binder and the filler all consist of Honduran Corojo. Indeed, it is a Honduran Puro. The wrapper is a 5th priming, the binder is a ligero, and the filler is a 3rd priming. To learn about what all of that meant, you can check out our video on how tobacco is grown, which explains the different primings, or you can head into the description below where you'll see a link to our written guide of how cigars are made and the different primings. So with that all being said, and now you have a full overview of the Corojo, let's get into the look and feel. So I have here a Toro 6x50 and a Robusto 5x50. The difference between these two, they're the same blend. You'll probably get longer, deeper flavor, more intensity in the Toro because it has the time to really caramelize and the aromatic compounds to open. However, I'm going to be primarily using the Robusto for this review. Nevertheless, we can take a look at both throughout the look and feel. So first of all, in both cases, it has pretty much impeccable construction. You don't have many soft spots, and if you do, they are very, very slight. And furthermore, the spring is quite firm, and this is the case on both cigars. As for the hue, you have a sort of cacao nib color, but it doesn't really give that much of an oily sheen. It is quite slight, and it does reflect a little bit of light, but it is overall quite matte in finish. Similarly, the veins are, I wouldn't say coarse, but it does have a relatively rustic aesthetic. Indeed, the Corojo leaf is not really used as a wrapper, it's typically a filler or binder. So this is kind of an unusual blend in terms of normal conventions. As for the aromas on the foot, so I've written down here on the cigar formula that it consists of dark chocolate, tonka bean and dried earth. Indeed, there's a slight dried earth mustiness, which you could perhaps it's a bit of a reach, but you could perhaps compare with a Cuban cigar. Nevertheless, it is an overall gourmand experience and quite rich in flavor. That leads me onto the Prelight, and in terms of draw, here I've already cut the Robusto. The draw is ideal, just the right amount of resistance and a perfect airflow. The flavors are also quite rich off the dry draw. It consists of molasses, compost, and I wouldn't say compost that you make in your garden with vegetables and grass cuttings, more like fertilized soil that you buy to plant some trees or plants or whatever. And cacao. Cacao is something that really does hit you with this cigar. But the molasses is quite interesting because you do get a slightly sweet residue on the lips after taking the dry draw. With that being said, it's time to light the cigar and I will see you in a minute. Well, I'm well into the first third here, and for starters, well, look at that ash stack. Excellent construction here. Slight bit of waviness, but that's not so bad. Hopefully it should correct itself later on. In terms of flavour, there's almost a caramelised woodiness. Indeed, it's an accord that's produced by, I'd say, a mix of fragrant rosewood and molasses, the molasses having carried in over from the cold draw. Meanwhile, there is a considerable amount of pepperiness, so if you're not a fan of pepper in your cigars, the retrohale does contain a significant amount, so perhaps avoid retrohaling. Otherwise, in terms of body, this is kind of around the medium full. The flavors are very, very full, but the body itself and the strength, they're lower than I expected. So it's not an overwhelming cigar, despite expectations perhaps being a little bit different. So 2/3 in, and the body has slightly increased, as have the flavors. I'd say the flavors more than the body. Here the woodiness has pretty much subsided, the molasses as well. It's not caramel, in fact a bitter component has been brought on by a note of coffee grounds. Meanwhile, there's a hint of Dijon mustard in there, which has created a distinctive spiciness, which is accompanied by the black pepper that has persisted and creates a very prickly retrohale. The ash plopped off, as you can see. It plopped off all on its own, and it has kept its shape, which goes to show good construction here. And the burn line though hasn't quite corrected itself. It's still a little bit wavy, but this isn't anything that requires touching up, so far so good. So here I am in the final third, and as you can see I've got a nice ash going again, and the burn line seems to have pretty much corrected itself. In terms of flavor, we're looking at, again, an increase in body, but it still doesn't really go far into the full-bodied category. It stays still quite medium full. The flavors themselves, they're not quite as distinguishable as before. Instead here we kind of have an amalgam of leathery and oaky notes with that distinctive black pepper in the retrohale that just seems to persist all the way through. The texture at this stage as well is quite thick. It leaves a film on the tongue, which has really a leathery flavor to it overall. Generally speaking, this isn't an overly complex cigar, nor does it try to be. Indeed, for Camacho, this is a bold everyday smoke, and it should be treated as such. It's not going to be something that is going to wow you with its nuances of flavor. Same can be said for its mouthfeel. Although it's more on the smooth side, it's not exactly as refined as you would want from something that is extremely premium. This is, after all, a sub $10 affordable smoke by Davidoff standards anyway. Nevertheless, when it comes to the palate stimulation and the astringents, this is perfectly balanced. You don't have any excessive salivation or dryness. Indeed, I've been smoking this without a glass of water or another drink just to keep my palate moist. And the palate stimulation is nicely balanced throughout the whole tongue. Then when it comes to the life cycle, it is quite, there are changes through each third, although they're not exactly elaborate. You do have this theme of pepper that persists all the way through. I'd argue that this is more of a consistent cigar that gives you the flavor profile that you would come to expect and look for in reaching for this cigar. As for the finish, it's not very long. You do end up having a sort of generic tobacco taste after about 5 minutes, but that leather note that I mentioned in the final third does kind of persist a little bit, and it'll be the last thing to fade away. That being said, the pepper will probably cling there too. As for the residual scent in the room, it's not as bad as I'd expected. In fact, I'm smoking with the windows closed and no air ventilation right now, and it's not as oppressive as I was expecting it to be. Indeed, it's actually quite pleasant. It's fragrant. Then when it comes to the burn, as I mentioned throughout the whole experience, the burn line does correct itself, so you don't have too much waviness, but it is not going to be perfectly straight. That being said, I have smoked Camacho cigars before that are perfectly straight. For instance, you can see our Camacho Connecticut review just up here, and there's also a link in the description below. And the draw remains perfectly consistent. Indeed, it is just the right level of airflow that you need. When it comes to the temperature of the cigar, this can heat up quite easily if you smoke it too hard and too fast. Generally speaking, you're looking at about 15 minutes of smoking time for the Robusto, but if you push it up to an hour and you take your time, it's going to be a much cooler experience. If you smoke too zealously and you're around the 40-minute mark, it might start to burn, especially here. As for the Puro, this is going to be a much longer smoke. You're looking at about 90 minutes, I'd say, for this one. Meanwhile, the ash backbone, as you could see, the ash it clings on very nicely. You get these good little ash stacks here that I'll just take off and put away there so it doesn't fall on the floor. And it produces a nice steely grey color. Next, we're going to talk about the overall experience of the cigar. So here we're looking at these nice big brash bands, as is the case for their bold everyday smoke range. This is this kind of pentagonal, it's not pentagonal, it's got more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 septagonal shape that takes a lot of real estate on the Robusto. Not so much because it's the same size band on the Toro, so you can still have it when you're about halfway through, but as you saw in the second third, I had already removed this during the review. What's quite cool about these bands is that you have this interesting watermark on the reverse side of the Scorpion logo, and also the Camacho logo is embossed. One thing I find a bit awkward with these bands actually is that if you were to smoke it with your left hand, you're going to have the logo upside down, so we're going to have to do it with our right hand if you want it to be the right way around. If you're a little bit obsessive compulsive like me, it's kind of frustrating. But as you could see, I was holding it like this because my right hand side is my good side. Anyway, moving on to the box. I don't actually have the box of the original Criollo on me, but you can see that in the written review, which is in the description below. Nevertheless, I have something that is quite similar, which is the Distillery Edition Corojo box. This is pretty much the same design, except you have the big barrels and the stills in the middle. On the original Criollo box, you're going to have a black cover with a red outline of the logo. And on the inside of the original Criollo, the color scheme is going to be flipped over, so it's going to be red with a black frame and black text. It's also going to give you the origin, the intensity, and the taste. On the Distillery Edition, it was spice, earth, charred oak, and cedar. But on the original Criollo, it says smooth, vintage flavor. And then it will tell you a little bit about the blend and the story behind their infamous Criollo leaf. Otherwise, the box is quite similar in terms of hinges. You've got the little logo here on the hinges, which is a nice little detail, solid wood on the box, and it's going to have this sort of lacquered finish as well. Anyway, we're going to now move on to the value for money. And here you're going to be looking at, it's a sub $10 stick in general, even if you go to your local tobacconists. Online, you could probably pick up a single for around $8.50. And then if you want to buy a box, it's going to be a bit less, so maybe around $8 if you get them on a discounted website. Of course, you want to support your local tobacconists. But that would be if you buy the whole box, so it's 8 times 20, since these are 20 count cigar boxes. And finally, for the occasion, this is a cigar that I would consider mostly for casual moments. If you want a cigar that isn't going to distract you and is something you just have pleasant to smoke while you're doing other activities, it's a good choice. Or it's a great option as well for backyard smoking with a barbecue with a couple of buddies. However, I wouldn't use this for special occasions, nor would it be something you want to really take to a well-to-do social club or a special event. Finally, we are going to take a look at the, covered in ash, at the pairings, and this is just a consideration we add at the bottom right hand corner. It's not scored on the cigar formula. It is just something that we like to take into account. So first of all, in terms of food, I'd say things like dark chocolate, pretzels, and Brazil nuts, basically deep, bold flavors, something quite savory on the more gourmand side, that tends to pair well with the cigar. And then when it comes to beverages, consider again bold flavors, so something like a dark, very dark rum, a Highland single malt, or even black coffee such as an Americano or an espresso. If you're having the Robusto, go for a double espresso. It should probably last just about long enough. That's all from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give us a like, subscribe for more content like this, and why don't you check out bespokeunit.com and see all the other men's lifestyle subjects that we cover. I'm sure there'll be something that you'll love. Otherwise, until next time, take care.